Brian, I may dial back in and use the computer.
Everyone turn your video on just for a little minute. I just want to see your pretty faces. Unless you're not got pretty faces, then I don't want to see them. But I know that Lawrence Brass has a very pretty face, and I want to see that at least. There you go. Yes. Finn. All right. It's good. So here we go. We're starting the week in the right way. And as we know, I'll just say how you start affects the rest of the game. So you've got to start big. Not only that, we're at a very important time, which is we've just come through the whole Pesach holiday thing. And it's very easy now just to float and to survive and hang in there. But Justifi and Jewish wisdom and life in general says you can't do that. Now you have to step up. You need a structure in your life, a structure of personal growth, and a structure of implementing the great insights and lessons and things you learned during Pesach. So very, very quickly we learned in Pesach that we have to find freedom from whatever's holding us back in our lives, usually some sort of pain, trauma, ego, that kind of thing. But then what happened is we crossed the sea, we left Egypt, we left behind the situation that was causing us pain and trauma and problems in our life. But then we got stuck at the sea, and then the Egyptians chased after us. And what that represents is that often in our lives, even once you've left the actual situation, mentally you haven't left it. You're still thinking about it and going over it and remembering it and suffering from it. Even though you've now left that situation, it's still causing suffering in your life. So what happened was the sea split. And what the sea split represents, and then we got to the other side of the sea, that was our final redemption. What that represents is changing our nature. Just like the sea turned to dry land to let us through, so too, if we really want to let go of all the past and things that are holding us back, we have to change our nature, which is really our thoughts. We've got to learn to change our thoughts. And that's what we've been doing here. So that's why Judaism says the first thought of the day has to be gratitude. And the first thought of the day has to be spirituality, and we've been doing that. So now our sages say to build a structure, we have a 7-week period of counting, and it's counting 7 times 7. Now, anyone who's heard any of my classes about my former life as a practitioner of Buddhism knows that Buddha said, I'm going to sit under this tree to reach enlightenment. And how long did he sat for 49 days, according to Buddhist tradition. And we have these 49 days in Judaism, leaving Egypt to receiving the Torah. And each week has a different power, a different energy. So last week's energy was chesed, the energy of chesed, which we said was open-hearted, loving kindness and giving. And we did a meditation around that. And I hope you've been practicing this, by the way. You've had a few minutes in your day to sit back and open your heart to yourself, first of all, and then spread your love to those around you. So this week is the week of Gevurah, and Gevurah means boundaries and structure and strength and the ability to conquer and overcome. So we want to tap into this internal energy that we have called Gevurah. And it says in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, Ezehu Gibor. It's this word Gevurah. Gibor and Gevurah are related. And a Gibor means, Gibor means a warrior, a strong person. Ezehu Gibor, who is a strong person? Who is a leader? And the answer Judaism gives to that question isn't the person who can beat other people up, or the person who can bounce a ball very well, or none of those things, or a person who makes lots of money. A Gibor, a hero, a Jewish hero, is Hakovesh et Yitzro, which means the person who learns to deal with their mind. To learn to deal with their mind and not let every thought they have become so significant. Don't let every thought you have create your reality. What we want to do is start doing something in Jewish meditation is called histaklut or habata. Now, histaklut means to watch. The histakel means to look at something. And habatao is labit means to also, just to watch, just to watch. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be a gibor, and we're going to just watch our thoughts. We're going to see them come. I'm not, as if there's someone else's thoughts. That's not me. I'm not identifying with that thought. I'm going to start watching my thoughts. And the way we conquer them is not to try and fight them, but it's just to let them go. One of my favorite stories is actually Bruce Lee did this in one of his films. Is called that he was on a boat, and there was a ruffian on the boat, and he started boasting and showing off and saying, I can beat anyone up. And he said to Bruce Lee, what is your style of martial arts? And Bruce Lee says, my style is to win without fighting, or the art of winning with no sword. One of those. Depends on what story. So he said, okay, come on, I'll fight you. So he gets his sword out, and Bruce Lee said, okay, but first we've got to go and stop in that island because we don't want to injure other people on the boat. So they stopped on the island, and the ruffian jumps out and he stands on the island and he's waiting for Bruce Lee to come out to fight him. And Bruce Lee picks up a big oar, and it looks like he's going to hit him, and he just pushes the boat away and rows away quickly, and the boat goes away, and this ruffian's left on the island on his own. And Bruce Lee says, that is the art of winning without fighting. Winning without a sword. So that's what we want to do with our mind. We're going to be a gibor. We're going to have gevura. We're going to have this power and strength. We're going to do that by not letting our thoughts beat us up, not letting our thoughts conquer us and overtake us. So what we're going to do, as usual, we're just going to sit up straight, and you're going to loosen your neck, and you're going to loosen your shoulders, and you're going to take a few deep breaths through your nose, and out through your mouth. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to start breathing in and out very deeply through your nose, very deeply and steadily through your nose. And just feel the breath coming through your nose and filling up your lungs. And then breathe out again through your nose or through your mouth. And just breathing in and breathing out. Maybe you can count 5 seconds in, very slight pause, and 5 seconds out. Okay, so what we're going to do for 1 minute is I just want you to now keep breathing in and out, but start observing your thoughts.
Dov Bay, you can go for an extra few minutes. 2-3 minutes if you want. 15 minutes total is fine.
I heard a voice in my head saying that I can go for a few more minutes. And that's great. So you might find that actually your thoughts slow down when you start stepping into an observing space to see your thoughts. The thoughts don't come so quickly, but what I want you to do is just let thoughts come and choose whether you want to identify with them or not, whether they're positive, whether they're helping you or not. So you can just identify positive, negative, and if they're negative, just watch them go away, like the ruffian on the beach jumped out of the boat. Okay? Just watch them float past. Okay, now I want you, and we don't often do this, but I think we're ready for this. I want you to think of some maybe negative thought you've had in the last 2 or 3 days. It's not fair that this happened. Critical voice stuff about yourself. And think that thought, and then watch yourself letting it go and saying, okay, I'm choosing not to make that my reality now. It doesn't have to be my reality. So you're going to bring up a negative thought and breathe very deeply and reframe your relationship with that thought and just say, okay, I hear that. Might be true, might be not true. And just bring it up and let it go. Someone said something to you to make you angry, or they didn't understand you, or okay, bring it up and then let it go. Okay, so they said that. Okay, it's not so bad. Or you made a mistake, you regret something. Okay, so feel that, let it go. Just 30 more seconds. Maybe bring up another thought. It's not fair. I wish things were different. I wish I was different. I wish someone else was different. Say, okay, that's just a thought. Let it go. Okay, so this is our first method this week of using Gevura. Gevura means strength, but the strength doesn't necessarily mean who's got bigger muscles. The strength is who's able to choose what's going on in their mind and don't let their thoughts dictate them. And using someone else's energy and stepping out the way and letting it go. The rest of the will carry on later this week.
Thank you so much, Dov Bear. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I trust everybody had a nice Passover, Pesach. Everyone's doing good. And following on from Dov Bear, let me just see. I can't see everybody. I want to be able to see some people if I can. It helps me. If anyone's comfy putting their video on, it helps me. If you don't want it on, I completely understand. It's totally fine. Okay. So following on, thank you so much, guys. A lot of the guys don't like to put their camera on before they have makeup on. I understand. It's too early in the morning. I get it. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Bunch of guys come through. Hi, Brian. You know, so Dov Bear is sharing something so profound and so important in terms of the nature of our reality. And if you think about what he's saying, or you maybe hopefully just experienced it a little bit, it's so different to what we used to, because we're so, I don't know about you, but I'm so used to thinking, oh, he made me angry, or, you know, that, I wish they hadn't done that, because if then I wouldn't feel like this. But the point over here, and this is what I think is so deep and so really, 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 really important to start to get one's head around more and more. And we have people feel incredulous about it. Is the idea that nothing's really happening to you in a way that will change, in a way that needs to change your state. Now that doesn't mean that before this session, literally, I just slammed my finger in a cupboard, okay? It doesn't mean that doesn't hurt, or that someone's really nasty to me. It doesn't mean that that's okay that they did that. But the reaction of someone being nasty to me could as much be compassion towards them. If that person just actively went to try and hurt someone with their words, they must be in a bad place and in a sad place. And I feel bad for them, right? And that's as natural a reaction to them being negative towards you as getting offended or getting upset. Both are reasonable. Both are just thoughts that come up in your mind, different ways of interpreting the experience. We've been in quarantine now for a number of months, and the whole world is experiencing a certain financial insecurity. Some people are connecting to that and say, like, I can't wait for this to be over so I can get back out there and take care of this problem that I'm having and make sure I'm earning the money again, and look at it that way, and that's legitimate. Other people can say, I'm so excited as to what this new world is going to look like. Maybe there'll be a whole different, right? And they're going to have a different experience of the concept of quarantine. So I think the first step here is just trying to get in touch with the idea, like in a real way, that the way that you choose to feel about things is the way that you experience them. And it opens up all different types of channels of understanding as you do so. And I harp on about this. I will harp on about this, in future sessions again and again, because to me, this is the major departure point. People will always assume that something's happening to them and not really understand that, no, what's happening is just it's just happening. But your experience of that happening is entirely down to your interpretation of it. And that, in simple terms, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, I experience this all of the time, that one day something won't irritate me at all, and the next day the same thing will irritate me, and the day after it won't. And it's pretty much the same thing. And the reason it changes is much more to do with my state of being when I interact with that experience, much more than the thing itself. And I wanted to spend a few minutes today talking about this in the context of Tikkun Olam. Many of you that are on the call are people that have done Justifi trips. If you haven't done a Justifi trip yet and you're on the call, you're invited as soon as we're allowed to fly again. You're all invited to join us somewhere warm and wonderful and exciting. But when we do Justifi trips, we're talking a little bit about Tikkun Olam and how to fix the world. And it's always such a funny thing on our trips, because when you see something happening in the world, let's say like a human trafficking situation, or a situation where where children are being used for labor, or there's no clean water in a particular environment, or there's a dearth of effective education in a slum, whether it's in South America or Central America, or whether it's in Southeast Asia, or whether it's in India. It's always incredible for us, incredible. We look at them and say, how could you possibly do that to another human being? How could they allow such a thing? How could the government this? How could they that? People need to change the way they behave. But if you think about it, there's lots of things in our behavior that we want to change, and we don't know how to change it either. Now, I'm not suggesting that when I lose my temper, when I get a parking ticket, that's equivalent to human trafficking. I understand that they're not comparable. But that's the mistake. The mistake is, if something serious happened, if something really important happened, I would look at it the right way, because the circumstance would make me. And what we don't realize is it never really works like that. In the end, you either get lucky and have the right mindset, or you understand this concept. You really understand this concept, and you realize that the way that you choose to look at the situation is going to evoke the reaction that you need. So when you can look at yourself with compassion instead of self-hatred when you make a mistake, when you can look at another person with compassion instead of hatred when they make a mistake, you create an environment of change in them, an environment of change in yourself. And that works in Tikkun Olam. When I'm traveling, and when a person is traveling and they see an opportunity to exploit another human being, the opportunity is objective. There is somebody there who is, you know, willing to work for you for less money than they should. There's someone there who's willing to take a bribe in a business deal. There's someone there from a human trafficking perspective, or whatever it would be, right? There's an objective opportunity to take advantage. If I understand that the way I interact with that circumstance is really down to me, and the way I feel about it is really down to me, I could choose a compassionate thought over an exploitative thought. Does this resonate with everyone? I don't know if anyone can shake their heads or nod or whatever. A few people yet. That's the concept over here, is to take responsibility for your own reaction and philosophically understand that what's causing your emotional state is your choice, not the circumstance and situation. I mention this all of the time. It's an old movie, not old, it was a few years ago. It was a film called A Beautiful Life, which was about an Italian film, and it was about a father trying to protect his son in a concentration camp by pretending that everything that was going on was like a comedy and a movie, and just kind of shield his son from the kind of crazy experience, and how he succeeds in doing so, because once the kid understands that, oh, this is just a movie set, so when he shot that guy and he fell over, that was just actors, or that the son is just not affected by it in the way that everyone else is, because his understanding of the circumstance is different. The thoughts that he has about what's going on are framed differently, and he has a completely different emotional experience. And taking back that responsibility is painful, because it's much more comfortable for us, without being facetious. It's more comfortable for us to be able to kind of blame things happening to us. It's the beginning of what real freedom looks like. It really is. So when we look at Tikkun Olam, what we're really saying is we want human beings, when they interact with a certain circumstance, to choose a different thought. So they choose not to exploit even though they could. So they choose not to cause pain even though they could. So they choose to give other human beings dignity even though they could oppress them. That's what we're really asking. That's what Tikkun Olam is that we get the world to a place where people take responsibility for themselves and therefore understand how to not interact with a circumstance, how to not feel the things that would allow them to exploit, that would allow them to cause pain. Whereas people will tell you, well, I'm addicted to going to prostitutes, or I'm addicted to this, or I'm addicted to that, or I'm addicted. And it's not true. I mean, there are truths in those sentences, but it's not true fundamentally. A person can interact with their own drives, desires, needs, etc. Take a step back from them and choose a different way of interacting with that need. I heard someone speak about this before, say something very powerful. They said, there's mindsets and there's method. So let's take, for example, diet. Yeah. If your mindset is, I will take in less calories per day than I consume, then you could do keto, and you could do gym, and you could do a water diet, and you could do this diet, and you could do that, and you could do. If your mindset is, I will take in less calories or I will expand more calories than I take in, the method is less relevant at that point. The method is just, but where method is there instead in place of mindset, in the end you don't get very far. In the end you don't get very far. That's why people say it's a lifestyle choice. It's a lifestyle. So what do? People look for method over mindset. People look for circumstances that make me feel better. In this environment I feel great. They look for situations that make them, rather than understanding that it's more a mindset of understanding that I will interact with circumstances. I will search for my thoughts as I interpret this experience until I find one that is compassionate and loving and kind and makes me feel good. And I will go with that, right? That is a mindset shift. We look at the world as if it's method, but the truth is it's much more about mindset than it is about anything else. Does anyone have any questions at this point, or is it all good? I didn't want this to be too lectury. But if anyone's got any questions, just before we move on to the final point. No pressure if people don't. Okay, good. So I'd like it, before our next session, if people can think a little bit about a circumstance or a situation that they often have, right? A circumstance or a situation that they often have that where they find that they struggle to interpret the experience in a positive way. Okay, if there are any parents out there that are watching this, okay, when one of your children has a reoccurring behavior that you interact with negatively, and you know that you create an environment of judgment. I know I do this. You create an environment of judgment. It's not how you feel. It's not even what you want. You don't want to do it. If someone says, why are you being difficult? You say, well, they did this. Yeah? That's the mistake. They made me. It's not true. They did a thing. You could ignore it. You could smile. You could be loving. You could be judgmental. There's so many things that you could do. The situation does not create my reality. I do. Yeah, but you don't understand. This kid's really annoying. You know, oh, this boss is really... Okay, I understand. And it can be really difficult. Don't get me wrong. When something's super close to your face, it's very, very hard. Of course, that's the skill. That's the skill. But ask any experienced businessman, okay? They'll have a newbie on the block. They'll have a new guy working for them, and they'll go into a meeting, and the experienced salesman will figure out how to make a sale despite the fact there were 50 objections. And the new guy will sit and say, like, how did you create that new reality out of all of those no's? He kept on saying no. And the salesman's going to say, I don't hear the no's. I don't hear those. I'm just always looking for a new opening. And the new guy will be like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. All of those no's would make me feel da-da-da-da-da. But the salesman hears a different thing when he hears no. He hears the guy closing a door and opening another. The new guy just sees the doors being closed. So we've got to think about these things and think about a situation that you find irritating, an interaction that you find irritating, an interaction where you struggle to create some distance for yourself. And in that environment, that's where you find your free will. That's where you find your distance. That's where you find your I guess your connection. That's the easiest way to say it. Okay, I think we're going to hand over to Alana here. I hope this is helpful for everybody. Let me just call her in 1 second. There she is. Okay, guys, take it easy. See you soon.
Hello. All right. It's okay.
That's me. Sorry.
It's fine. All right. So just a little bit of a change of tempo from all this very calming. I try not to listen to the sessions before my lives. I get too like zen to be able to talk high energy, so but I can't help it. Anyway, so speeding up the tempo. Today's topic is a topic that just comes up all the time. It's such an important one, and it's the question of infatuation. Now, we have spoken about the difference between lust and chemistry. This is not that topic. Okay, lust is all physical, and here we're discussing infatuation. So infatuations might be physical, they may have a physical element, but they really don't have to at all. In fact, the rule of infatuations, they can be centered around people that you've never even met, which can be embarrassing. People get infatuated about, TV stars and pop celebrities, and it can be really real. And people feel that they can't breathe, they can't function, they can't sleep, they can't eat. It's like a complete obsession over a personality. It can be male or female without that being a reflection of your sexuality, which can be very confusing. It's usually happening through teenage, but not necessarily. And it's a very overwhelming experience. And my theory is that most of us have experienced it, and so we should have. The question is, what is it? Because once we can understand what it is, we're going to have a much easier time being able to use it to our advantage and becoming free of it, okay? Because people do feel completely possessed by their obsessions. So for those of you who've experienced this feeling before, and I hope it's all of you actually, as you'll understand when I describe it, let's get some infatuation freedom going over here. Okay, and again, if it's something that happened many years ago and you're over it, then it's not freedom that you need, but certainly you can have a little bit of insight. Okay, so I'd like everybody, while you're writing, to quickly write down, you know, something that really stands out about their infatuee, we'll call it. Okay, the person that they were infatuated by. Either, you know, just write whatever comes to mind. First 3 sentences to describe the person that they were infatuated with or by. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Oh, it's all gone quiet. All gone quiet. Is everybody writing? No cheating now. Okay. Don't have to write too much, just something. Yeah, sorry to bring up if this is an old painful memory, but there we go. I think I might be correct to say that what you wrote about this person is either a reflection of the you that you want to become, or how you were made to feel, or something of that nature. Yeah, that correct? It's usually correct. Okay, and what we're going to discover about the person with whom we were infatuated is that actually, I know it felt very intense, but it's almost like they didn't exist as they are themselves, because it's really not about them. It's about the forming us, finding somebody upon whom we projected our idealized self, idealized state, our future state, how we wanted to feel. The common theme of the infatuation is that it's completely centered around you. It's got very little to do with the reality of the other person. It's got to do with how that reality reflects back on you. Again, how it makes you feel. Sometimes you see something in somebody else that you want to become. Sometimes they see something in you, and that creates the total obsession with them. The whole, if you like, object of the obsession over here is actually not the other person. It's actually you. And when we go through our teenage stages, we are to some degree really forming, because when we're children, really we're just a product of whatever's happening with our parents, or whatever's not happening with our parents. And before we hit adulthood will be the emerging identity when we come out of this and we really are somebody. And in that horrible interim stage, we're transferring the royalties on who owns us from our parents to ourselves. We are emerging, our identity is becoming a thing, and in that process we're trying to figure out who we are, because again, until then we are such a reflection of both in our upbringing and in our identity of our parents. You know, when a small child looks at a parent and the parent smiles at them and the child smiles, the child only knows that they exist because somebody's smiling at them. It's a very deep thought. The child does not really have a sense of their own existence until somebody looks at them and says, oh, hello, you exist, so I'm smiling to you. And then in my reaction, I suddenly realize that I exist. So at the beginning of life, we have no consciousness of our own existence. We're not conscious of our existence. And when we hit adulthood, we need to be not only conscious of our existence, but conscious of the consciousness of our existence, which I'll leave to the innate health teachers. But this meta-consciousness, this ability to perceive our own existence, is something that we grow into. And in our teenage stage, we are assuming our own identity. And to some degree, we need to have the experience of falling in love with ourselves. That ability to be in love with ourselves, to love ourselves, to appreciate ourselves, is going to be what gives birth eventually to the ability to love somebody else. And in that stage, we are so self-obsessed that the people around us who will act as a sufficient mirror for the emerging us, who we are, how we want to feel, how we think we're going to become, who we want to become, they will become the subject of our obsessions, because in actual fact, the subject of our obsession is ourselves. And once you realize that, you can get tremendous freedom from this feeling of being possessed by the feelings you have for somebody else, because it's actually not about them, it's about you. And the more we can grow into a complete sense of feeling comfortable with who we have become, and a sense of being, comfortable enough to be able to admit that we like who we are, or we love who we are, the more easily we'll be able to let go of the person who represents our ideal self, because we are that now. And at that point, we can actually achieve freedom. When you recognize that the person that you're infatuated with is, they're not really the point. They're just the puppet, actually. And it's actually about what you've projected onto them, or, how you've seen yourself in them. Once you get that, you can put them out of the picture. And then instead of becoming obsessed with ourselves in an attempt to love ourselves, we can actually fall into a very calm place of feeling appreciation and love for ourselves, and then we can go ahead and give love to others. It's a bit of a being in a cocoon before you're able to be a butterfly. It's that sort of experience. So I think that's probably what infatuation is. And here's the important thing: when we move on to our actual relationships, our loving relationships, a lot of people express to me the disappointment that they have, because it just wasn't quite as intense as their, the infatuation, the first love. Okay. And here's the slightly scary truth. You're probably never going to feel anything as strong for anybody else as you feel for yourself. Sorry, we were just made that way. Okay. Possibly for your children, but only because your children are an extension of yourself. So it's another form of that selfish love. The feeling that we have for our children is not something we have to work on. We're compelled to feel it because it's a reflection of the very natural love that we feel for ourselves. What's amazing about the love that we feel for this new person, not this mirror infatuation person that was all about us being in love with ourselves, actually, but this new person that we've chosen to love, is that the power of it is that you're not compelled to it like you were with the infatuation. You don't have to work on your feelings for the person you're infatuated with. You have to work on not feeling it, because it's so overwhelming. There is no effort involved in the feelings you have for the person with whom you're infatuated. There is a constant opportunity to renew the feelings you have for the person that you choose relationship with, because now you've done the most beautiful thing, and it's such a grown up and such a spiritual thing. You've said, well, I'm already in love with myself. I will already be in love with my offshoots. Anybody who's a mirror of me, I'm going to be obsessed with. But now I'm going to do something godly. I'm actually going to love somebody who is completely other to me. And that, because it's spiritual, involves choice. And the choice is constant and continuous. And every time you re-choose the person that you're with, because they are an other, so you're not compelled to loving them, you're never compelled to love your spouse. It's true, we get a bit of a blessing, when God sort of tricks us into marrying them, that we fall in love with them. Like, that's just to get us under the hook, but that's fine. Yeah, but after we've made that commitment, we're going to do that another time. But the love that we feel is something that we have to constantly re-choose, because all spiritual experiences are choices at the end of the day. Again, except for the few gifts that we get to nudge us along the way. We get the gift of inspiration at the beginning of something to nudge us along the way. And once we're in, we have to keep choosing, and it's the choosing that makes it spiritual. So don't be scared of feeling less for your spouse than you felt for yourself or for your infatuated person. You don't have to work on that. That comes naturally. And it says very clearly in the Torah, right? It says, you should love your neighbor like you love yourself. What does that mean? It means that you already love yourself. It doesn't say work on loving yourself. All this nonsense about low self-esteem, we can talk about it, and I'm sure we will, yeah? We might have low self-esteem, but we love ourselves, okay? We have an instinct to feel judged if we're being judged. We have an instinct to feel wronged if we've been wronged. We have an instinct to self-protect. We have an instinct if we're hurt to protect. We have all these instincts, and it's true that we can get so caught up in our thinking that we disconnect ourselves from that instinct, and that's where low self-esteem can really come in. It's completely misguided thought that disconnects us from our nature, but our nature is to love ourselves and that which is part of us. And the goal in our relationship is to bring our relationship to the point where the person that we have chosen is so much a part of ourselves that the love we feel for them is natural. But the ability to constantly re-choose it because it is spiritual is always an opportunity that we have. That's not the case again with the infatuary. That's just a compulsion. So it doesn't even count. It's not spiritual love. It's just maturity. It's just becoming an adult. So I hope that sheds light on the difference between the feelings that we have for those whom we choose and those, who seem to possess us. And I hope it gives us some freedom from those thoughts, anybody who gets visited by them once in a while. And I hope it gives us a really strong sense that this working on our relationships is a sign that they're healthy. It's a good sign. And I think that that is me for the day. So thank you for listening, and I'll pass you back. Uncle Jamie. Uncle Jamie, passing you back. No, back to Alberto. Right, okay.
Thanks very much, Alana. Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing? Those who are, hey, Emma, those who are visible, that's great. It's much appreciated. As before, those who are not, if you want to, if you can, it's definitely encouraged. It definitely helps. But if you prefer your privacy and anonymity, that is also okay. So we're going to carry on from where we left off last week. I'm going to share the screen with you as I did before. Here we go. Okay, all right. So we were talking about about emotional intelligence before, for those who weren't here or for those who were, but it was a long time ago. So we started looking at this idea of emotional intelligence, which is basically the skills we need to do well at life and to help other people around us do well and to enjoy being around other people and be someone that other people enjoy being around. And a person that other people feel good around and a person that brings out the best in other people. And this is mostly coming from the work of Daniel Goleman, who's the expert in this and whose books I recommend reading, but this is a very short version. So we looked last time at self-awareness, which is one of the 5 main skills. What we're going to look at today is self-regulation. So some of you emailed me well, I don't think the people who emailed me are actually here today, but just so you know, it's an option. Some people wanted this sheet for themselves. Maybe the fact that I sent it to them is the reason they haven't logged back in today, because they don't need it anymore. But either way, the sheet's available. But I want to look at self-regulation. So what is self-regulation? It's the ability to control or redirect our impulses. It's the ability to take control of our impulses. And some of the ways, the consequences of it are going to be trustworthiness and integrity, comfort with ambiguity, and openness to change. So I'm going to share a few ideas about how to improve or increase our self-regulation. So I'd put it like this. I'd say everyone has areas of life where they can naturally self-regulate, where they're just naturally good. And everyone has areas of life where they don't even notice that they're not self-regulating. You know, you can have people who are naturally very good with their spending habits, with how they regulate their money. And you have people who are very, over-regulated or under-regulated with it. So everyone's got the areas where they generally are pretty good. There are areas where they tend to under-regulate, meaning they just do whatever appeals to them. And we've all got our areas where we over-regulate. So we are so nervous about doing too much that we end up doing too little. So the first key is going to be to identify an area of under-regulation in our lives. And the temptation is going to be to just, work on the thing we know we're good at, right? I always meet these, people who have these like washboard abs and perfect bodies and stuff like that. And they just, they look great. And I talk to them about this and they say, yeah, I need to watch what I eat. I need to be more on it with my exercise. And, deep down inside, they know they're good. They know they're good. And, they could be doing one of two things. One is fishing for the compliment. What? You work on your, on your calorie intake? No, you don't need to. You look great. They might want to hear that. Or they might be avoiding the thing that they know is going to be really hard for them by focusing on the thing that they know is good. So I'm going to share one way of improving our self-regulation. It's much easier to start with, or much more effective to start with, the area of life where we under-regulate rather than one of the ones where we over-regulate. So I'll tell you a technique. I'll share a personal technique that worked with me, an area where I started to regulate more. What I did was, and I'm not saying I was necessarily under-regulated in this way, but this is how I did it. I took the area of spending money. And what I did was, as an experiment, I decided to go an entire week without buying anything, meaning not to spend any money for an entire week, but to go to the shops as normal. Now, when I say not spending any money, I mean, obviously, the things that I need to do, I did. When my car ran out of petrol, I bought more petrol. When I ran out of milk, I bought more milk. But when I say not buy anything, I mean, I need a new t-shirt. No, I'm not going to buy it. Or I'd be at the shops, I'd see something I liked, whether it was a bottle of chili sauce in the shops. I went to the shops to buy milk, and now I see, HP sauce. For those who are British or have been in Britain, it's a very important thing, or whatever it may be. There's a good deal on this. It was to say no to absolutely everything. And that first week seemed like a really, really long time. But then at the end of the week, to look back on it, and what I tried to do was make a list of what those things were that I almost bought or wanted to buy. And then ask myself after that week, how many of those things do I still feel that I need? And then go back and actually buy myself those things that a week later, I still feel that I should have bought and that I needed, which was about 30% of them, which was an amazing thing for me. So it can be with anything. You can do it with food. You can say, not going to eat anything with sugar for the entire day, but allow myself to eat it tomorrow. And that can be a really powerful thing. So you go through the day and you see all these things with sugar and you don't eat a single one of them, but you write down a list of things that you are allowed to then eat tomorrow. And then at the end of the day, to look through this really long list and realize that now that you manage to regulate past that and you're allowed to eat them tomorrow, a lot of those things you don't really need to anymore. And some of them you still will. So that's one technique for regulation. Another, and everyone please is, feel free to make this, interactive, discuss, ask questions if you like in whatever format you want. So that's going to be really one thing. Now, it's going to be really, really hard to work on the things that we tend to over-regulate ourselves with. That's going to come next. So really the key is going to be with the things we under-regulate. So the first thing is things that are very behavior-based. Okay, we need to start with the big behavior-based things, which, as I say, could be how much money we spend, how much we consume, how much we talk unnecessarily, how much time we spend on the internet, how much time we spend on entertainment, to really make sure these things are regulated. And then to try to get to the point where we're regulating our behavior on a much deeper level, meaning we're regulating our reactions, very much like Jamie said, where we're recognizing that certain people doing certain things, we think it makes us react a certain way, but really it doesn't. It makes us want to react a certain way. It makes us almost react a certain way. So to get to that point where we're aware of that and where we're responding rather than reacting. So a really important key to that is going to be knowing our own triggers, meaning each of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, can recognize that there are things that we overreact to. That, people do certain things that aren't right, but there are things that bother us way, way, way too much, or rather that our reaction to can be out of proportion. So the first thing is going to be being aware of those things, right? Just knowing that there are things that I allow to affect me in a deeper and more destructive way than they deserve to, and knowing that sometimes my reaction is self-defeating, and taking the time to think about why that thing is, to put strategies into place for avoiding that stimulus, right? Could be a very simple thing. Like for me, noise, specifically the noise of people eating noisily, bothers me a lot in public places. My strategy was very simple. I've always got headphones on when I'm on the bus or whatever it is like that, you know, as most people do. But for me, it was just a thing. I need to remember to take my headphones with me, and then it also sets me up to be able to listen to nice music or whatever it is on the bus. You know, I have long bus journeys some mornings. So it's whatever it may be. So here is some of the questions we can ask ourselves. Just a quick review of the self-awareness one. So last week we looked at the self-awareness scoring chart. And just as a reminder, I said that we can't really ever score ourselves accurately compared to anyone else. No one can have an objective score, but we can have a score compared to ourselves of yesterday. And even though we can never really be assessing ourselves totally accurately, the process of trying to assess ourselves is really what's going to make the difference. So there's our self-awareness score sheet, but let's look at our self-regulation score sheet. So here on this, we've got 3 indicators. One is our ability to interpret and redirect disruptive impulses and emotions. So that's really going to start with taking an audit of, through the day, how many times did I have a disruptive impulse or emotion? And out of those, how many times did I manage to interrupt it or redirect it? And just thinking about that again, with no judgment of ourselves, but just thinking about it and noticing it makes us more aware of it and makes us naturally get better at it. Another one is, how flexible are we? How able are we to deal with uncertainty? Now, in the period of time that the human race is in right now, this is exactly the thing we're all working on, meaning we can deal with things being good and we can deal with things being bad, but they're just not knowing how long this will be and not knowing how different things will be when things are over is a very, very difficult thing to deal with. But the measure of our ability to deal with just not knowing is going to be a really important indicator. And it's really important to not confuse this with being apathetic or being too laid back. It's very easy for some people to be extremely laid back and to say, yeah, whatever, I'm just going to roll with it, I'm just going to flow with it. Sometimes that's a real and healthy thing. And sometimes that's just an excuse that we can hide behind. It's lack of concern, it's apathy, it's not flexibility. And then the most important one is our ability to take accountability for our own feelings and actions. Meaning to recognize, as you know, and this is something that's going to come up a lot, you know, and as Jamie said before, is to recognize that we are accountable to a certain degree for our feelings and to a greater degree for our actions. Now, I would suggest, and not everyone will agree with this, but I would suggest that there are times when our actions are not in our control. It's possible to put ourselves in a situation that we are not in control of, but we are in control of the fact that we allowed ourselves to get into that situation. You know, for example, I'll share a personal example, and I know there's at least one person here who might have seen this, but I was a high school teacher for many years. And, you know, sometimes, you know, high school teachers will tell you, you know, sometimes you can be in a really, really difficult situation in a class. And every teacher has lost their temper at some point. Now, I would say that many times that one loses their temper, they are accountable for it. Not that we've got to, again, draw the line between accountability and blame and to blame. We've got to put blame out of it and stop blaming ourselves, but it's being accountable to ourselves. There are times when a person loses their temper and they are accountable for losing their temper. There are other times when I believe they're not accountable for losing their temper because that wasn't their crime. Their crime was allowing themselves to be put in a situation that was so bad that they couldn't not lose their temper. And that comes down to self-awareness, to a combination of self-awareness and self-regulation, to know what our triggers are, to know what our strengths and weaknesses are, and to know where our lines are, and to see when we're starting to be pushed into that place and to immediately get out of it. So these are things to think about if we want to be more self-regulated. So again, everyone's welcome to send me an email on ovadia@justify.org if you want a copy of this sheet, or if you've got any questions about it, want to discuss it further, want to correct me on anything I've said, I'm more than open to it. But that's the idea. And next week we will move on to, or next session, we'll move on to the concept of motivation. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Jamie, you there? Okay, so thank you all so much for joining. I'll be sending out at some point soon information about the next session, when it is, and about potential other opportunities and things like that. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day if you're already somewhere through the day. Have a great day if you're just at the beginning of your day. If somehow you're at the end of your day, have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Oh,